tides. In the wake of war, in the wake of demise, that is the only thing that comes in these instances things. Like I said in the last time with the multi-case stuff, for a little small recap that built it up with this, multi-case of warriors came, destruction was rained down from the case of Holocaust and Warmonger, and a run of different Saiyans in the past of warriors ready to fight for the better means of Heathmore now in the Saiyans, and the means of peace that was made up, now fight better and all in the Saiyans. In between the lineup, all this insane stuff, the original case of the four warriors of the four factions from the case of the Knights Warden, the Vikings Raider, the Samurais Kinsei, and Vulin's female Tsiandi, all fighting to go and ensure means of peace. They would depend on the Saiyans, die because it's very iffy on the account of the status of the Lord, but they all have to kind of go and die in between the means of fighting for peace. Especially in the arcade, even though from the account of the arcade, it was like in the scenes of festival fighting, it wasn't actually by definition death, but in other correspondence of things that course in this, especially in the lineup of the tides, it seemed like a big strain on the case of all their forces and run into the form of being death defining experience, and they could never get around the fear enforcement that was coming. And so in the midst of that, in the bigger case, tides from the lineup of Tempest and other warriors trying to fight, and other big things corresponding into the case of the loss and unfortunate demise of warriors, was stringing the great warriors that would fight in the great deliver of darkness that came from Warmonger and do different things. They would fight against them, build a better means, Holding Cross would come, bringing the greater means of the herd, strongest warriors. But unfortunately, in the midst of the lore, which is very 50-50, because of how dumb it is, which I'm going to go more in depth with, not like in the sense how done, because I'm not like going to be clearly breaking that down. If you want to get a sense of like why the For Honor lore is not good in general, then go to my For Honor lore is bad case video and my discussion about that, even though it's going to come into a place of technical like talk and how to better progress it and overarching conclusion when we get to that, as we only have one more video after this that talks about the overarching state of the For Honor lore, right? But in the timing of this, the Shichirian dies. I forgot his real name. I might put it up on the top right of the screen if I remember from this editing them on. Check yourself, right? If that does happen, right? In the sense, the form of the Shichirian dies from the Saints again overrun by somebody in the Saints of the arcade, and his force being taken out. Now, it's kind of mixed because the Centurion you play in the game could be any case of Centurion, as this comes into the bad states of the lore that would stick out in this time. You see, the For Honor producers / For Honor developers and other people tied in the main because of how the lore is presented and ran in their own right is so terribly designed, because of the fact that one of the producers said that if you make your own lore within this, like the For Honor players make their own lore within the game, right? And technically that could be fine in the sense of talking about, hey yo, you make the own lore in the sense that you accompany how the lore goes out its way to be this and this because of the way things are. And so within the timing of this, it's simply the fact that, okay, yeah, this story and the way it's like is not made out just because of you, but your characters that you make is such out to be the bigger involvement within the story, right? Simply put, in different case of missions and games, your characters are not actually integrated, but your characters and what they are to the bigger expansion of the lore and game or technical other stretch of things could be the bigger involvement that this game's lore has on them, right? Because it changes people like that. That could simply be it. It could simply be the foundation of new story structure from warriors like that are going through change, mainly because of the fact of what Warmonger and other people have done, what they have done to spark these different sayings of things within these characters. And depending on how they write that cannot be bad. But what they did instead of having, okay, yeah, your characters have strong suit, technical bringing of something else in the lore, pull some form of bigger difference within the same sense of how the characters in the map and other stretches of different things lead to this and this and this like that, but not actually whatever the case of the community wants to be lore and headcanon being defined as truth. You see, ships and random shit made up by the community now can be considered canon because of the pure fact that the people in the community would want it to be or have the need to make it become something like that because it simply is just needed to now. There's no actual case of actual story, good structure, or anything like that. It's just random spouted shit that holds no purpose of existing and is randomly plopped in for the case of excitement for other people to be able to make different things. And so now that's been the stain of what's happened. So the most of what's happened is then the Bushi X Warden is canon, which is kind of like a subjective thing if that's good. Like, this shit, it was just made up, right? It doesn't have no purpose, right? And that's fine. I'd have no problem with anybody that likes the ship, to the people that made the ship, nothing like that. There's no absolute problem at all. It's just the pure fact that because, again, it's fake, it's not real, it doesn't make a difference within the case of the For Honor lore. It holds no purpose of existing besides just to fill the gap of the sense of not any form difference. And sorry for that form of ad there, but on the joking half, it doesn't feel any case of difference or move the lore. It's just there. And again, that could be fine. You don't need to have a big sense of the lore or an actual couple that stretches new means for the lore or does anything like that. It's just simply put, not an actual case of difference or making of something better for the overarching case of the lore. Is just that. It's just a random state of story brought into the case of the For Honor lore that doesn't do nothing else for overarching sense of stuff in the game. It's not a strong form difference in the case of the lore. It doesn't pull nothing different in the lore. It's just something that was made up, brought in. And so that now led to things worser than just making a ship possible. I'm fine if you want to make a ship like that be the case. It's also from the YouTuber Zanny, and now I had his whole Centurion love relationship with Peacekeeper be actual canon. Like, the Zanny lore has some substance matter of canon now. And again, that's fine, because let me make this clear. I'm not trying to say by default it's bad, but I'm saying because it doesn't bring nothing, don't have no strong suit substance, and doesn't hold any bigger matter, that should not be the run of anything. And actually strong, solid, slapping stories that beam something different into actual character progression should be the matter of different, better stuff, and should not be cumbered together by just being, oh, one ship, one instance of little snip of freedom from the community to make something like that happen be the place for where things should be drastically different. That's a problem. And I'm not making this up. You could look from the time of the lore, and you can make up random shit to be this. And at hardcore, I don't have this as a problem, but it leads to having a in the case a very bland form story. You know what I'm saying? Because again, it's a concept of one of something that doesn't really hold much, but at the same time, by definition, isn't bad. But if you let it spray out the way that it has progressed to this point, where everything is only a deform of the actual lore, it brings it down. This doesn't just come with ships. This doesn't come with fan fiction. This came with somebody being able to write in 1 second something, but then the lore changes that shit. You can write the lore from your characters and make that be the definement of how things are. They could change the lore in drastic cases, and they pretty much got lazy and allowed us to write the lore and switch things. You can allow 1 second Dominic to be alive, which, okay, is good, but the next second he could be dead. Holden Cross, in a different form RPs, could be alive or dead, and by the cusp of what they believe could be the case. This lore is so mixed and so unproductive, and is literally just laziness and has no carve, no purpose, no bigger means for why it does what it does in this instance. It's literally just another case of lore dump. Y'all can't tell me that there's a bigger purpose for doing this besides, oh, we just don't want to make better form of lore. Again, it's not the ships, it's the purpose that it stands. Like, what is the purpose of stuff like this? Tell me, like, what does this really bring to the lore? What bigger grace of writing do we get from this? I can't name a single thing. And so tied with that and the fact that yes, Centurion's dead technically in lore, but somehow he's alive in game and you don't even know who the Centurion is by mainline lore is weird. So it's dumb. It does not make sense. We're not talking about a random Centurion coming into play with different form stuff. After parsing from Tempest and I think into the red mainline form season, it dragged ridiculously and they have no bigger form progression and just random shit happen, right? So that's where my problem stems from. It's just bad overarching interior form writing and didn't burst any new means, no bubbles, no bigger cornerstone form standpoint. It's just random shit. So if you want to know where the Front Lore downpours to something, I feel like it was that because there was no interior motive. Because the thing is with For Honor, it never had a clear, defined state of direction, right? It was kind of like a comic book in some precautions where, okay, yeah, there's not a defined stance of road or whatever, but there was interesting stories of different elements of things that could be intricate and be brought into a different form of spectacle, sense of liking from the actual lore in the place of other people's being, because nobody full Big Pete cared for it, but when it doesn't strengthen anything in the characters, it doesn't strongly push for anything, and there's no overarching motive for why it does what it does, it deforms a lot of the strength that it was at the time or what it could be, because all of it is not even anything to be bothered with as a community. It's simply just no need form something. It is not something to be bothered with. It is booty. It is ass. It is not a good productive form story. It's just there, right? And the case of the developers didn't have strong form reason for it, besides it wouldn't allow you to do this and do that, which okay, but if that's the entire definement for what the story is, just fan fiction and people making up shit that pushes the story, that's bad. And there could be times where, yeah, that would be good. Like, I don't know, somebody has a RP and they actually have more stronger form lore, like a RPer like Lancey Productions, Nicholas Rainwater, God's King, somebody, any form person that you know that does RPs or anybody in the systems of that community maybe could do good, but role playing should not be the paint of the story or should be made up form run of story, especially when those stories at hardcore is random stories that they made up that is not put together within the story of the For Honor lore, the main concept. It is coming together from their mind, their any substance of anatomic creativity, and brought to life and run of For Honor's game, not the regard of the story. And even what's corresponded with it is not actually tight tailored with the greater essence of bussin' that you have in potential. So that detracted it. Next second and tie with it, with the lore and the bad premise, you had people with, especially in the lore discussion, that Raven Knight, Slanderous, Eskimo, and I forgot his name. I think it was just Vat Boom Boom. Maybe John O'Leary. I think John O'Leary was there. He barely was even talking that part of the conversation. He just peeked into the gameplay. But in discussion, you could look them up. In Raven Knight, I also want to say he is one of the better people like to guide you on the unfortunate problems, the critical basis of thing. I'm just giving a little snippet of my opinion and the pure fact that this shit is ass and it needs to be talked about and why the case of this lore has went to this length of being doo-doo, right? Because me explaining it is going to confuse you, but I want to get you into the understanding of why it's bad. So when we put forward this stuff, why it goes downhill. Because when this shit happened, because it already was kind of like mixed in production, but it had potential. This shit destroyed it for me. I feel like this is the season where it stopped. Where we're at right now, in the case of the page from my blue notebook right now, my whole stand YouTuber ting, Drake for recording from the case of our 5th episode here, with ties to the case of Battle for Havemoor, is a run of shit and not the most defined case writing. In this story arc, the characters are all coming together as random case people and don't actually have anything that was brought bigger for the lore or anything. It's just random stuff with no substance. It's bland. It's not interesting. It's not educational. It don't bring nothing. This is not anything knowledge worthy. And so the problem with having people want to make their characters mean something for the lore or do this and do that is the fact that it's not anything for the lore itself. It's just allowing you to have freedom, which is fine. If you want to make a Captain America version of Afira, that's fine. If you want to put together a Liu Kang version of Shaolin, that's fine. If you want to make Lawbringer look like a cinematic masterpiece in the same instance of repping a Game of Thrones Spartacus state of build when it doesn't match historical accuracy or the fantasy of For Honor, that's fine. If you want to rep a warden that's a literal medieval war machine like War Machine from Marvel Comics, that's fine. But those characters should not hold a place in the outer states of the lore. They should not stick more better for the case of the character. And even though it's just roles, it's just characters, if that's going to be the way For Honor is going to progress its story for allowing people to make characters be the plain stasis of what the For Honor lore is, the For Honor lore is going to be droughted of all grace of water that it can harvest from, because that's going to be the stain of it. You do not make characters interesting or put them in different introspective case a character means. You make them make whatever character out of the character, when the characters, for the most part, by the higher pretense, have defined means for what they do. They do not have anything more interesting because you don't give them any. You make them be made up, and that's fine. You can create your characters, you can customize them. I'm not even having my characters had any form of weight to the characters in lore, but you try to make strong characters in the all right. You can make up the characters for how they are, but the actual characters, the character of Medjai, the character of Shaolin, other characters, actual characters, Griffin, make them actually be impactful and put forth actual better means. You don't have to full deep dive into all of them at the same time, but you try to make some way to strongly string in better course of things for the characters. Because why does it matter if you or this person want to make this when the main purpose of the lore should stand as the core? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying to disregard people's liking for this, but at hardcore, again, no disrespect to people that want to have the characters have some remnants of, like, I guess, truth or stand in the lore. But boo-hoo, your character is not as important. Your pride does not hold a bigger impactfulness than the purpose that we should let the story course with, which is bringing impactfulness in the sense of the story, better drive, convey an interesting sense of mental and psychological points, and strongly ride out the fact that this game is about multi-splurge of conflict and what this conflict means to the people and different corresponding ideals. Make some actual effort to make a better story. Have some compoundment of some brain cells one time and actually do it. Don't be lazy and dive into some dumb shit that legit degrades every essence of what a story could be, where you let random people in the community define what the story is. It's not good. The community can build it up. When you let them line up all the stances of shit that doesn't mean nothing, it downforms the story to being just whatever. There's no story, there's no impactfulness. And a lot of people at first didn't come to front for a story, and a lot of people at core did not. But there was a little semblance of that. But now, no matter, in the words of Raven Knight, if people are coming back to laugh at it or peek into it, nobody strongly cares for the lore. It is random shit put together that holds no substance matter, is not interesting at all, and holds no weight at all in the slightest. It is simply just random case shit brought together to try to insinuate better start for the lore and all that, when it does not hold any actual substance. It does not bring any interesting character motive or interesting introspection or anything. It is simply just booty. It is fodder. It is ass. It is non-weightful. It does not sting, nothing different. It is a bashful, critical thing to say that this game has any sense of weight now as an overarching story, because it just doesn't. This story is bland. It is not interesting. This story will never bring anybody in. It will never have a hook. It will never hold a place. It is simply ass. It is fucking fodder. I've never seen a lore be so consistently shit onward from this, because there is nothing interesting. They don't bring no interesting character or nothing. This shit is just booty. This shit is just booty. It's ass, bro. I don't understand how anybody can get into this. Like I just said to rescind my exact statement, this shit is just booty. This shit is just booty ass. It is not good at all. And even the supplement for where there can be some grace of goodness, it does not carry the story enough to really strike some new weight or dive in something better. So I just wanted to get an explanation. That's it for Tides. Time to go talk about the Battle of Heathmore. My goodness, this shit's ass. And the stars are aligning, the great battle pulse, and the big busting top to the bottom. formed essence of the drop of blood came to the essence of an eclipse. The eclipse ran down a vision to people and was the strength for Holocaust to fight in a big form of saga fighting and a big start for the case of Humors fighters in the form of Chimera facing against the wolves in the Sansons, the predators, the pillars of might in the form of Holocaust popping off a new instance of unhinged means. It sparked a new form of control means, the fight for different territories and the breaking of Heathmoor as a whole. Astria got a mystical case of potions and hexes in the form of a great magical material known as Dragonite. It's able to cause out spurs of things and cause COVID-19 disease and do different things like that. It brought a great deal of chemical enhancements in the form of the fight and strengthen the numbers ridiculously. Holocaust would be able to evade and dominate multi-case of troops and warriors that would fight against them with this. Being able by gameplay and other stuff to be doing some bombastic, booming different Santa stuff and clear the way for any Saiyans into fighting with them and bring great poison. It would chemically burst out of control when she would be doing some bomb stance into means with it. In the mix of all the fights, it would be nothing but Griffin and a few warriors to go and fight against Astria in the mix of the Eclipse battle. It is between the players for who wins, but if we say for the good guys best, Griffin with them win, and sometimes being accompanied in Dragonite and being able to fuel themselves with more power for the midst of having the power of, Dragonite, other stance and things like that, as it's a mixed bag of, okay, yeah, we did this, we have this great stance of power, but we only stand with it for so long because we get chemically more stronger because of the midst of the battle that comes with it. So, everything being said now, our strength as a form of warriors will grow in the words of Griffin and mixed with Chimera, as in the same sense of our purpose now was to evade all the saints in the burst of bad and the darkness that came over from the eclipse, and it would be games of them feeling to go ahead and try to grow better next day in a sense, and in the midst of fighting, in this case, someone like Astria, it would be a new emergence of strength for them and others around. As simply put, they did not have specialty as others to go ahead and fight Chimera full hand-to-hand, paw for ball with this, but they did have the connections, they did have the honor, and most importantly, they had the means to fight more than ever. And so now, with the rest of the coming extent, it simply was just Astria trying to fight against them with greater control of this stuff and boost numbers out with warmongers. And in the mix of this, within a better history and bigger connection, this is where Griffin would tie together his connection with the others and try to build the best bond with all the form warriors that would hate Warmonger and what she would do to the later half. As even though they had a great strong connection, they didn't have all form allies. This is where it would pull in Stagander to have a stronger bond with Holden, right? To the last time they spoke all the way in the past. Aya to join with them, Sajiro, another possible precaution. The fighters are still alive to be in the numbers of Chimera and to strongly give better grace of fighting capabilities in comparison to them, even in the same sense of unfortunateness, So that is where all this comes, as in a simple sense, they have the capability to fight and be the best and be against them, but didn't have the strongness to basically full dive in and full do these different sense of things, and they didn't want to indulge from what they stood as far as great A-form warriors and other cases, stuff like that as well, So that's what happened in the case of the Battle of Heathmoor, and the bigger stretch of things that would stand in the form of the way would only be from the Dragonite and possible case of ties to come. The great fight would be booming different, but in the mix of Sanson, the fight, and other cases, things like that, would also come a great ties to different things beyond what they knew. They fought for Great Wise, they fought for Eclipse, but to ascend in madness beyond that would be ridiculous. What they did was what I doubt chaotic, staying in the crop of war bygones, with multi-cases of people dead, sacrifices, but this new stay instance of being stuck in a plague and unfortunate sea of chaotic means would change the means of everything. as in the midst of her arrival, somebody in tie with different unfortunateness in the sense of the things would change the game. In the midst of the means of plunder, in the mix of the chaos, will brew allies, enemies, and new being of different things that were no longer in the counting of fighting for honor, but fighting for the grace to call yourself a warrior. In the midst of all of this, like I said, when I grace to be a warrior, it was simply just a stack of different things for grabs. And in this mix would be the Queen of the Seas, the Chinese pirate that you would know, being impossibly to have the same name as being inspired and representing the same type of feel of legendariness as the great Chinese pirates. I give you the pirate that we see here. And the only reason why you have the music that would be tied with the case of Arabia coming is that she is aligned within the same ship to come in the mix of the last horizons to pause into playing, And so, in the case of her coming in, there will be new spoils to be gained for the case of the riches and bigger drought to come on the form of the bringing of new means for the warriors of Heathmoor mixed with Hawkos and the Warfront, as they didn't have all the capabilities to do this and do that in the long run, but with Pirate's help on two different dividing sides, luring that in. To get a little bit into Pirate and who she was, Pirate comes from a specific place in the Saints China, speaks Cantonese in the form of how she speaks in Sanskrit and speaking Mandarin and other Sanskrit things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong on the first Sanskrit language, as I might be not the most educated. I'm not trying to be ignorant in the Sanskrit of talking, But simply put, she had a great case of knowledge on this place for picking it in and having her ship the most deadly case instance of pirates on the fucking backdoor, like saying some shit like with Edward Kenway. And she was rocking with a great crew, running through people, went from multiple storms to get here, traveled here for the loot and the spoils, the thing that came through war, not siding with either side, even though she tried to go ahead and run with the Wulin, but the Wulin pushed her out, outcasted her because instance of her means of doing stuff, the fact that she rocking with things out of sense into their mainline culture, as gunpowder and the sense of things like that is in her pocket, but because obviously this game is mixing up time, she has weaponry, different capabilities, literally from late 17th to 18th century, and she rocking with things that could be a demean of a traitor or a case of a person doing things to try to go and exploit them for the capabilities that they have, but really using them for slanderous means of the Wulin, using them for out-of-pocket means. It might also be, this is headcanon, but a string of the fact that because China suffered great loss to Mongols, that the Wulin might see this as treachery to be using the enemy's weapons, like the same sense in Ghost of Tsushima, where Jin's uncle really has a great, how should I say this, envy form dislike to the same sense of the Mongols and how they stretch so out and deep into the case of their home, and they use disgraceful case of different tactics to put down the samurai. And Jin is over here using some form of that in some ways, one or another, with no care, and uses them in a very disgraceful form means, as it is obviously not a rival form practice and is an OD sense of one, and is disregarding the culture that person in Pacific comes from in comparison. You know what I mean? That's pretty much the whole stick. But tied as well with this, Pirate runs up here repping a whole different crew. The Outlanders. Not a actual crew as a form of faction, but being the fifth faction in a run of different warriors that fight for their own purpose, but might have a partial sense of partnership in alignment with them. Like a mercenary faction, but more like deep out there cultures that have not been aligned within the big, deeper stick of things within For Honors, already brewing conflict and war that comes within things right now. That's pretty much the whole stick of the Outlanders. And so in the midst of her coming in, that opened different wars for their sense of things, as in the form of plunder, deeper things beyond just what the factions generally are fighting for, and also open the door for new people to come to the border of Heathmoor. And now, within the mix of this, you learn about a same instance of the things that would bring the kind of things that I talked about, that would spray more things more than this, beyond just the pirates coming. As for the record, her coming did not start this mission of war that will come, as in the form of in the same sense of Horkos, but it brewed more of an opening for different things, as in her midst of taking different sides, gave different degree of things ideally to use in the mix that would brew more stain the crop of unfortunacy and low undue form of hate and killing beyond. But what a Viking would do here now would be the stain of the crop of unfortunacy that Heathmoor will have never seen ever before.
In a far corner of the world, legends speak of a bracelet passed down from one pharaoh to the next. It was said the bracelet could restore life, erased from history, faded from memory. Now, I have found it. With the bracelet, I bring glory to Valkenheim once more. Yet in its wake, darkness spreads. What have I unleashed?
The Viking's name was Baldur. I actually know a name, but it's a sheer case of a man right there from the general sense. Baldur, again, ironic that I know his name in a more strong sense character than the Lord Tabit, but don't take as much from uniqueness as the others technically, would come up in the mix of a bunch of problems in Valkenheim. He wanted to bring great means to his people as people was going through drought, multi-case of running out of food, disorder would come. He wanted to bring great means to his people, but in the midst of trying to go on multi-episode ODness to do it, he went out and saw a bracelet, saw it in legends, saw it in different saints and tales. He went out, slapped himself to a case of a boat, went there, sailed out, saw the pyramids, went to ancient Egypt, aka Egypt at this time, ran up all his stuff from the case of the cataclysm and greatly harming Egypt, taking away a lot of the grace that had still a great wonderful land. He went on to a motherland of Africa and saw that there was a Magi. This Magi's name was Nefreka, or Navar, however you say his name. It doesn't even sound like a proper African or Egyptian name, I'm not gonna lie. He went after him, not in the same sense of like harm. He didn't like full seize, so no, he stood there trying to saw out where he could possibly get help. And so he did that, and he saw him. They had a friendly bond relationship. There was a place of honor. They had a mutual form conversation of understanding and considerable disagreement, but it didn't form into a case of like he persuaded him in understanding what he was doing. Because what Baldur was trying to do, like I said, was trying to push to get something to help his people. The bracelet would bring great fortune and deliverance of greater things for his people. In this case, would with the bracelet bring greatness onto his people in the form of blessings, as the bracelet, as you see by the context of the trailer, passed down to Pharaoh, giving them great blessings. He was going to get all the blessings to his people. He's going to try to get 72 virgins when he dies, like shit, right? So he decided to go ahead and do that. And when he told Nefreka this, he said that no, you cannot take it. It is rightfully our Egyptian heritage. It is mine by right, technically, to hold this here. In the same instance, is the stain of our culture. If you take it, you take away any scrap of our legacy. In the same instance, it does not belong to. And as a Magi in comparison, history protects the case of the pharaohs belongs as they descent down into the bayou, descent down into the case of the underworld, or course into the river of Styx, in the same sense of other things, or even come up into the field of reeds. Anything that's aligned within the case of the afterlife in Egyptian mythology and their folklore and legends holds place of great means to him. He's a very cultural, seeming like caring dude, realistically as a form of a Magi, right? But Baldur eventually, through really needing it and needing to have it and seeing the despair his people was going through as Valkenheim was suffering from the war, different things, and all this other saints and stuff, he took it. He betrayed the trust of him, but he had good intentions of it. So he went to Valkenheim. Great blessings was brought, great stuff, great form of shining ovation of a new prosperity. Greatness came to Valkenheim. Feastment, wine, beer, all said to the state of what makes people in Valkenheim, who they are, came back into fruition. But in the great drought, water descended from the land. It was a disperse of all greatness after a few great nights, few great moons of love and greatness for the people, falls down to being the demise of his people. As you see, even though the bracelet brings great goodness, as it not being its rightful owner and not being in its homeland, it now brings a state of nothing but unfortunate and great deal of droughts in case of disorder in the place. It would bring a plague of disease. The drought again, the water would descend from the water. It would now bring a bigger case of unfortunate horrors and unfortunate situations within the people staying since a living, as no person now had a means, a better means for living, as their living was shunned out by the case of the other Vikings, as they now crumbled as a society, as their form of living within the spaces of time would be downgraded to being trying to harvest scraps, as again they were shunned up because of the reign of goodness that other form Vikings had, and they didn't have to worry about the outside. They were ignorant to the unfortunate case of downfall that was coming. It was brewing, and eventually a Christian stasis of story person to play, like in the case of the story of Moses, where the water turned red, it turned into blood, raining frogs, disease, fire, chaotic bursts of things came into play. And from that, Bolthorn would withstand a curse like no other, not just in the same instance of the case of the unfortunate porridge of cancer that came to his people, and unfortunate stuff and disorder and unfortunateness that came from all this thing since a need to do something good, and then being brought with the most karmatic case of event ever seen. Here you took the biggest L Frauner has ever seen. This is more descent into madness time, more than Apollyon coursing down psychopathic means from a scarring event with her village. Nah, bro, this was the biggest L of 2023 that I've seen from looking into the lore, because this came out long. I'm gonna go for 1 point because it didn't come in like 2022, right? It's been a minute, but it's like, yeah, this was the biggest L that you could ever take in this stasis of time, and he was not ready for what was coming next. Like, he was just not prepared, big fella. It was a dungeon for this man. He was not ready for the overarching acts of bad that would come. He was thinking he was going to be the main character, but nah, you are not the main character, buddy. Medjay is. And so in this stasis of drought and this downgrace of everything that he fought and pushed for, he was a curse that would scar him mentally, physically, and spiritually. A curse where his skin would turn black. He would become Black Raider. He would be cursed and put through the case of great demise in the stasis of what will come next, but in the form of his being corrupted and scarred to the fullest. And even though having a skin that's not the most enamouring or interesting, he just straight up became a vessel for disease that will bring more destruction to Valkenheim fully. And so in the midst of this, the person that he betrayed, a person that thought he would be an honorable warrior and be real with him, he came back for in his own rights is his. Which in this instance, I'm gonna go ahead and display the kind of like voice that Nefertari had and the purpose that he stood now, in the sense of having what he has now and the purpose for why he does what he does.
In the vestiges of my homeland, legends speak of the Scarab Bracelet, fated to curse any other who would sully it. What is mine by right was stolen. Heathmoor suffers, and I am the only one who can stop it.
It says that Prowler is a warrior from Egypt, and the run of what he was saying when he means what was mine by right was stolen, he says that in the same sense, not of like royalty, not straight case of like a warrior doing something out of necessity of trying to rep the pharaoh by like allegiance of that, but simply scraping away the legacy, being dishonest, running away back to your homeland, bringing chaos and splurge of cancer to your people, and disregarding the purpose that other Medjay specific him stand in the place of his history, and in the tis of what it is, he pretty much just run off with it without taking consideration the buy-ins of what the case of the Scarab would do in comparison. He only thought about the grace of the other stuff, even though Vraka told him what it means to his people and also the possible case of combined events that could pull in the same sense of that. He got a great deal of riches and blessings, but he also got a porridge of unfortunateness. And Vraka holds dear the same sense of the legacy that accompanied from the bracelet and things like that. So the dishonesty and the betrayal corresponded big much into the place of why things are the way it is now. So that's a little bit of insight for why. But in the midst, he came to Borthorn, possibly killed him within the mix of trying to get it back in the war front of that and pushing on the case of the river fort, his case of village like town and stuff like that, and running his ship and tearing for the case of his people to get it. And in the mix of this, other Medjais as mainline of Rucka only came here for the bracelet, and now I guess because there's no purpose back in Egypt, as the rest of Egypt has been destroyed from conflict and buried within the sand from the case of the Cataclysm. Him and other case of Medjai, somehow as it's incoherent, it's inconvenient to the overall status of the game, so it kind of don't matter. Come and now try to make a living / life over here in Heathmore and try to do something like that in the best way possible, I guess. You can simply put, they don't have anything truly, so that's why, in this regard of things, this is why he is doing what he's doing now, which is protecting / pushing back Case of Orcos, because he sees that he could possibly do good. And it isn't actually a run of true character for why he does what he does, but he seems just like some solemn, humble, strong dude that does what he does for people who can't do it themselves, with in the words of Baron, that kind of Gitsushi's kind of not strong form, character depth, or anything, but he has a proud means for why he does what he does, especially since he holds a case of honor and a stand of like legacy and culture to dear, especially when this man robbed him. He came back to this man, was in plain sight, ran his shit instantly, was already in the record to go ahead and try ravaging through people to get to his stuff, and holds dear in the stand of being a warrior, repping his country, no matter stand instance. You can't just fold on him 1 second and probably say, hey, yo, I'm not going to steal this, I can understand your situation, there's the last minutes of culture, and just do that. Pretty much his entire standpoint for why he did what he did and things like that. And so that is why, in the case of, Deal Broken, past meeting, he does what he does. In the midst of Medjai's rise, is pretty much bringing new glorious means for others, being a cool character, stellar in the case of interaction, and just being a beast on multi-presence of clean shit. Coming with mystical bions and different sense of means for people. He would fight with the case of Chimera and do different things for them in the main side, and push back case of Horkos is different reinforcements to different people. And that's kind of it to the overarching character and how Medjai is a very just mediocre case character all around, with the fact like he has strong status of point, but he doesn't really have a strong purpose in mind besides the case of, what was mine by right was stolen. His stance with it, especially with the actor, and the actor's dope case voice, but his case of diligence and run of integrity to the character don't really possess a better means overall than for the characters being in full. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Peace, I'm Army. Love ya.